Om Natatra Suryavati Natandra Tarakam Nemo Vajutovanti Kutoyamagnihi Twameva Vantumalibhati Sarvam Tasya Vasa Sarvamidam Vibhati Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. There, within the indivisible self of all living beings, the sun shines not, nor the moon, nor stars, nor fire, nor lightning, much less this tiny mortal flame. That one light shining, all else shines. By its light, all is made radiant. May that light of pure conscious awareness enter into us and permeate us to the very core of our being. May that Brahman protect us. May it sustain us, and may it illumine our thinking consciousness. May we not find fault with the world, with each other, or with teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om, Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om, Tat Sat. We gather here together in SRV Loka, more specifically Sharda Ramakrishna Vivekananda Loka, to discuss facets of Satsang in Satsang. Satsang means truth, and besides being that one non-dual pillar upon which everything is based, we also find that it conveys to us that tool of Vedantic wisdom that the seers are availed of when they appear before us and we get darshan with them. And then gather together in groups whose minds are focused on thoughts of reality alone. Very good if we can do that even 1 hour on a weekend, as we've been doing, and then followed up by some Atma Vichara, the God blogs, which we'll have in a couple hours. But we have returned from a break for all of you on Satsang and just picked it up last week with Kanya as the host and Annapurna being away with family for that precious time. And we had a freeze in Portland and a retreat, which froze us inside of the ashram. And so we couldn't venture out. Many of us, some of you watching now, got to enter into that subject of the 4 yogas, how to integrate Jnanam, Bhakti, Karma, and Raja. Raja meaning that yoga of meditation, which is 8-limbed. That was a lot to bite off, what to speak of to chew. And then the digesting happens after that. And this nutrition that we get from the word yoga and its various practices, the 4 great yogas, which Vivekananda called the new religion of this age, as I was saying last week, transcend religious convention and go beyond book learning, philosophy, really a very universal term, yoga, if you make sure and guard against reducing it only to a physical form, but take it into that 8-limbed level where not only your body receives nutrition and lungs and so forth, that would of course be your asana and pranayama limbs, but then you begin to concentrate on these limbs of control of the mind, because it's the mind that has produced everything, the worlds, the body, the senses. When you dissolve all of those, whether you do it in dreaming and deep sleep tonight for a short time, or whether you do it at the time of leaving the body, when so-called death approaches and the soul transmigrates, whatever the case may be, you're going to have to give up those outer tattvas and that outer shell. Like a tortoise, it draws its limbs back inside itself, as Krishna says in the Gita. And at those times, then try and increase your awareness of self with a capital S, so that you can open these nadis or these internal passages to inner realms, lokas, bardos, kingdoms of heaven within you, however you want to call them in different traditions, and become a master at passing through these channels inwardly and coming back out. It's generally called involution and evolution. In Vedanta, particularly in Samkhya Yoga, we look at Samkhya Yoga as being that permission we get and the teachings that we receive that show us how consciousness moves through the tattvas or through these various principles. That's called the Adi Daiva Vidya. Adi means original, Daiva means divine, Vidya, of course, knowledge, the opposite of avidya, ignorance. So it's a beautiful three words you put together there to contemplate upon. Adi Daiva Vidya, the original divine knowledge, was and is still to India the knowledge of involving after one has taken on the expression of the Lord in a body. As Krishna says in the Gita, very few see him who comes and goes, who appears in bodies, and plays and sports with the senses, and then takes all of them and retreats back inside. Very few see them, but they see him sporting who have this inner eye of wisdom, jnana chakshu. So the seers are on the lookout then for those souls who become aware of this ancient divine wisdom. And although everyone may be using it in one form or another, it's a matter of how facile we can be with it, especially in this age of darkness, they call it Kali Yuga. And where people are doing very odd things, like yesterday right here in our locality here, 2 shooters, I call them shooters, and everyone was afraid of protecting they were protecting the children and so forth. And so you never know when Maya will throw these punches at you and at your life. And then you're going to have to be availed of a deeper kind of protection than conventional protection out there through government and armed forces and medicine and so forth. You have to have this inner immune system built up using your mantra practices and your prayers and your meditations, all focused on that internal reality. So this is why it's very important to have this channel called involution, which science doesn't provide us with, and conventional religion doesn't explain. It's not very detailed just to say that there's heaven, earth, and hell. But you need to know that there are different bodies, different worlds, and different elements which the soul uses to get into the body and get out of the body. Doing that so naturally every 24 hours, but not really aware of the details of it and the dynamics of it. So all of that becomes very precious to the seeker of truth who wants to stay close. That's why I chanted Na Tatra Suryavati Na Chandra Tarakam this morning to start things off. There's that light within, which is when you go there, you find that the sun out here disappears and the moon, lightning, stars, and fire all dissolve into that. And that light is the light that's shining. It's the light you see when you shut your eyes and open up these nadis to that divine jyoti or shabda. Some beings seeing as light, some beings see it, hear it as om, hear it as the word. So all of that fills in these gaps in our current thinking, or non-thinking, as the case may be, because a lot of veils are pulled down over knowledge like that. The person who retrieves it, recovers it, and utilizes it is very blessed in this day and age. And we find out that our Sharda, Ramakrishna, Vivekananda ideals hold us in very good stead in that way. They focus upon those most important areas of knowledge and heights of wisdom. So we can always count on them. They're the light we see when we go inside, whether they take on a form or not, or remain a formless ocean of awareness, an unbounded ocean of awareness. When one sees that, one gets transported into bliss. Sat Chit Ananda, I was reading yesterday, Swami Vivekananda's just definition of that great word. Sat, he said, the bhaktas and the gyanis have no controversy around that. They both believe in existence. The bhaktis and the gyanis, meaning those who follow the path of devotion and those who follow the path of wisdom. But then when Chit comes along, you find out that the Vedantas and the Gyanis, they focus on that path, on that aspect of Satchidananda. Sat is already assumed existence is. There's no contention or argumentation about whether God exists or doesn't exist. It just is. And then the Sat Chit Ananda, the Chit part of it, you find out that that's this wisdom, this vidya, paravidya, this higher wisdom. And the Gyanis will concentrate upon that, he said. And then the Ananda part, you'll find the Bhaktas are emphasizing that. That's the bliss and the devotion part of it. And so it's just a matter of accent, which of these aspects of Brahman, also called Sat Chidananda, one focuses on as one's path. Hopefully, leading to that light and leaving the inner pathways open so that the soul can reconnect to its source. Father of Yoga has said that too. The Divine Mother of the universe will strip name and form away as the soul returns to its original source. She accomplishes both those tasks. The transmigration of the soul back to its essence, koibaya it's called. And at the same time, the dissolution of all these names and forms, which if they're not stripped away, and as we know, don't even have to prove anymore, people get attached to. And when they get attached to those things, then falsities, untruths began to come forward, like, oh, I'm being born, I'm dying. Those are not true. You're never born, you never die. That's the soul inside of you that you have to contact and identify with so that you'll know that you're the Atman, you are the eternal being. Nam Richor Nashankaname Jati Beta. I have no birth, I have no death, I have no father, I have no mother. I am Shiva, I am Shiva, I am that pure conscious awareness. And so the soul sings that song of victory over death and realizes that it's an unborn principle and realizes that Brahman within. But one must keep these pathways open. So in satsang, we try and do that through questioning and approaching the guru. You see basically there that beautiful chant comes forward from the Gita, and wherein Krishna tells us, approach those wise souls and learn the truth from them. prostrate before them, serve them, and then they will share with you the wisdom of Brahman, which is this ancient divine wisdom, which, though ever true and ever free and ever bound, nevertheless can be covered by this Mayic covering. So anytime you think towards the divine thinks towards you. Anytime you yearn to realize the identity of the individual self with the Supreme Self, that becomes a thinning of this veil of covering. They call that Avarani Shakti, the covering power. There's also a distorting power, Vikshepa Shakti, that is there. So those two things the seeker watches out for, the covering power and the distorting power, and looks for the revelatory power in everything. Prakasha Shakti, that's called. So every time we ask a question, then we're thinning that veil. And then once it's thinned, we have a chance of dissolving it completely. And then we have to hold on to that realization, because as you push the green scum away from the lake and look at yourself, and you finally see yourself, then the green scum comes dancing back within a few seconds. You have to keep pushing it away so that you're always in knowledge and in view of your own true self. And you don't mistake the body, the senses, the objects, and mind and intellect and ego for that self. Those are coverings with different degrees of density. So you're always doing this practice. That is, the Vedantist is always doing this practice of self-revelation, self-realization. They call it by different names. And it's that combination of four yogas, which we feel does it the best and explains it well. So then come forward with this little introduction I've given you today to warm up your minds to the subject. Hopefully your minds are always warm to it. But on Saturday morning, we get this chance, isn't it? Sat morning. So it's the perfect satsang day to talk about sat, truth. And I can see Isha's already ready to read us something to inspire us.
Namaste, Babaji. Namaste, everyone. I don't really have maybe a particular talking point as of now, but I've been thinking deeply about the words of your guru, Swami Aseshananda, when he said many wonderful things, I guess, but I'm really thinking about when he spoke to the group of the Vedanta Society. You must have been there, or your brother, or even Annapurna at some point. He said, he made the point that the Westerners have deep samskaras of vasanas. They have these deep mental impressions of wanting to have wishes and have desires for themselves and the world. And I've been thinking about that deeply. And when you hear him say that, and when you think about the state of our Western societies, you see that he's definitely saying something which is very true. And yeah, maybe I probably asked you about this thing before, but it's a very deep and beautiful thing to even think about. And if you could maybe just for a short while say something for me about that, that'd be highly appreciated.
Yes, when he was speaking, he would quite often use that expression, vashana samskara. Sometimes he would even almost yell that. And in the spirit of trying to wake people up to the fact that their desires, and probably every religion in the world agrees with this, is that desires are what are keeping one from realizing the truth and realizing God, who is said to be apta kama. Kama means desire, and so does vasana. Those are two words for desire in Sanskrit. But you talk about names for the divine, one of them is apta kama, free of desires. That's the name specifically for Lord Shiva. whom I just quoted that, Na mrityur nashanka name jati beda, I have no death because I was never born. How can that which is birthless have a death? So Shankara is always speaking in that vein of non-dual truth, Advaita it's called. So when one reaches this exhaustion of one's merits, if you want to put it in Buddhistic language, and storing up of good merits, then one has an opportunity to detach from the world of desires, vasanas. Vasanas are causing karmas, and karmas then cause the soul to think and act along a certain route, and form a I guess the word most used in Western psychology would be a complex, some sort of a complex. A samskara is a condensation of residues that come from acting and thinking. And the residue is in the mind. The karmas can manifest through the body. That's what diseases and various things are. So they do have an outer manifestation, but the source of them really is in the mind, like everything else. So if one can get into the mind with these purificatory rituals and practices, then that residue can be kept at a minimum. And then, as good that you brought this up, is that that's one of the ways of opening up these inner channels, or nadis they're called in yoga. We're talking about psychic nadis here. The physical nadis, well, they're known, and you can do certain cleansings and so forth and so on. But basically, the Raja yogis and people who are working in the mind know that when the mind is mastered, then will is mastered. And when the will is mastered, then the body becomes like a puppy following the master around. And so do the senses. The mind and senses just come under your control naturally if you're able to remove the residues of samskaras from the mind. Some beings are even born free of those samskaras. They say about some luminous souls that they'll actually intentionally keep a little karma that'll help them get back into the body, because when the soul sees the light without any inhibitions or any curtains, any granthis, knots in the way, then it tends to go towards that. And like a moth towards a bonfire, it can't help itself. So if they keep a little bit of karma to get them back into the body, then they're probably a jivan mukta, or in Buddhism, that would be called a bodhisattva. So this will keep their soul tied so that it can return to earth and embody and be about the business of helping others also fulfill their desires. In our tradition, and particularly in Sharada Ramakrishna Vivekananda associations and the Ramakrishna order, the teachings about desire are that there are some that will lead you towards detachment, and there are some that lead you towards bondage. So you're going to have to discriminate between those desires which are not injurious to your spirit, your spiritual life, that is, and are actually beneficial to them. In Tantra, that's like fruit dropping off trees. If the fruit drops off the tree, then it leaves a little gap in the tree where you can see the sky. So they look at desires like that, that they're to be fulfilled. And that teaching is followed up with the teaching of the need to dissolve these imperfections in dharma, in dharmic action, rather than adharmic action. You'll just add more fuel to the fire, like pouring gas on the fire to try and put it out. If you try and fulfill desires without the guidance of the guru, without the help of the mantra practice, without meditation, and without study of the scriptures. Basically, those are those 4 yogas again. So it's very unlikely that the soul is going to rid himself of desires and samskaras without these practices. Sadhana, that's called, spiritual practice. So you do that day to day, Shankara says, to keep the mirror of the mind wiped clean. Because you may be clean one day and you think the game's over, Maya's afoot. And you're free of it, and then things change back, either individually or with the collective mind. And these karmas rise again out of nowhere, like white beetles coming out of the woodwork, one singer in India says. I don't know where these came from. I thought that I had rid my house of those. But all of a sudden, there they are one morning, infesting the house of the mind. So one keeps one's mind mirror of one's mind wiped clean all the time. And the cloth, you might say, is the willing mind's ability to do practice and sadhana and wipe the residue of those karmas away. So by doing things dharmically, that's one of the 4 fruits of life. You put dharma first, then you do your actions, and gather your sustenance, that's artha. And then your desires, kama, you do all of those after having taken refuge in the dharma. And that ends in moksha. So that's a divine mother teaching in our tradition. Dharma, artha, kama, moksha. Start out with refuge and in this practice in the guru and in God, Ishvara, with your practices of devotion, meditation, and so forth. That all is covered nicely by dharma. Then your actions for wealth, artha, and your desires for the world and for fulfillment, kama, will lead to fulfillment, which is moksha, liberation in life. It could be a jivan mukta even. It could be liberated at the end of a life and never come back again. But you can also attain the state of jivan mukta, jivan mukti, and become a jivan mukta and come back consciously. Should a man be reborn? They asked Swami Vivekananda when he was here. And he said, I certainly hope he does not until he can do so in full consciousness. So when you see somebody like him who has come to Earth and even came to the West here in the late 1800s for us, you see a person that has achieved that, has achieved full consciousness and returned as a living, liberated soul. Sri Ramakrishna called him Nitya Siddha. Nitya means eternal. Siddha, in that sense, means perfection. The eternally perfect soul. So, was born there in India and traversed the world and came to even here to the West in its most materialistic phase called America. And is busy at the behest of Sri Ramakrishna, spreading the Dharma for the highest good of awakening souls. Awakening to their inner perfection. It's not something that you get in the future. It's not something that your practice even gets you. You just do your practice. It's something that you remember because it's the nature of the soul. It's not like the original sin theory. It's not like that at all. It's in original perfection is what Vedanta talks about. And then there's this covering power and this distorting power that you're not very good at neutralizing. And otherwise your desires would not be that strong. That's called equanimity or evenness of mind. Non-reactivity. The Zen Buddhists like that. They keep everything non-emotional, non-reactive, so that the ego mind mechanism doesn't get out of balance and create this residue that makes it afraid. na vachoni vartante aprapya manasa saha. Ananda brahmana vidvan na bibeti kutas janeti. It means basically that one reality, if you keep it in mind, the mind and the speech recoil from it because they can't express it. That is, the tongue can't express it and the mind can't conceive of it. But it does away with doubt and fear. And there's no doubt about that. And then the mind and speech remain quiet and equal, equanimous. And if you hold that long enough, then that light of Brahman begins to seep into your thinking consciousness again. Those nadis that were once closed open up like undammed rivers. So vashana samskara, nice term to think on in Sanskrit. Sanskrit, it's called Deva Bhashya, language of the gods. And I've studied it in this lifetime alone for 50 years now, and I find it to be a path to God itself. Just the language itself is a path to God. All you have to do is learn it a little bit, understand what the words mean, because so many seers got moksha, or they got illumined by that language in ancient times. So it's carrying a lot of spirituality in it, vibration-wise. So you could have a word like Adi Daiva Vidya, the original divine wisdom. And remember, growing up in the West, we might have had a wild thought about that in high school or college. Where is that wisdom? But how heavily it got covered over by society and conventional religion and politics and so forth, until it was non-existent, buried. But bring it back with a few words of wisdom. And we know in our tradition, the way we think of that is that that's the Divine Mother, exists in every word. She's the mother of all alphabets, all languages. But that's a general overall assessment. But the real beauty of the language is that each letter contains the power of her name. There are particles and letters. And they're just like there are atoms in objects. So if you go into the word there, Adam and the son of wisdom, our teacher used to say, remember our founder, Lex Hixon, he, in his Sufi phase, wrote that book, Adam from the Son of Wisdom. So that's the idea, that each word, each letter holds the power of Shakti in it. And you can use that power, and some people have used it for destruction, but you can use that power for the highest good of beings. I remember speaking about Swami Aseshananda and Deva Bhashya and vashana samskaras that he used to talk about. Sometimes he would stop in the middle of a sentence and say, the West has split the atom and released a great power for destruction. But Sri Ramakrishna split the atom of Maya and released the power of good for all human beings. So this covering power, this distorting power, it can be seen through. That would be splitting the power of ignorance, the curtain of ignorance, drawing it aside with your own self-effort. And words would be one of your best weapons for that. That's why Durga has got 10 arms. She's got a shield, she's got a spear, she's got a bow and arrow, she's got the mala, she's got a skull cup, she's got so many things. Read my book, 10 articles of Sri Durga and what all that means. So take her into the fray of everyday life and be protected and also penetrate through to the goal. She is your divine companion. See? Want her to be a male, then she's Ishvara. Her sons are there, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. Who else can add into and contribute to the satsang this morning? You all brighten my day. As when I'm here on my own, I'm just thinking these things, but now I get to actually run them through my mouth, get me talking. But this is what my mind's thinking all the time. I love that. I love this, you can tell. And words, the source of words are thoughts. Thought is father to the deed. That's at least one wise Western saying we have. Thought is father to the deed. So if you think, it will become. And so make sure your thoughts are positive ones. I think Gandhi was talking about that. Make sure when you think thoughts that they're positive toward the highest good, and don't let any negative thoughts come in. Those are called klista vrittis, when your mind vibrates negatively. Klista means pain-bearing. So if you want your life to be painful, yeah, go ahead, think negative thoughts. But aklista, if you want your mind to be free of those negativities, then keep these thoughts high, at least neutral. Maybe high would be good, neutral later, because in our tradition and in Zen Buddhism and other Indian traditions like Buddhism, you've got that ideal of cutting down the vrittis. Practice meditation and cut time down, and cut space away, and dissolve name and form, and therefore dissolve your karmas. Those are the 5 things that the curtain of nations is made up of. Maya curtain is name, form, time, space, and causality. So when you're doing your actions and you're thinking your thoughts inside of that mantle, it'll produce more of the same. So take your mind up and out of those things and think in Brahman. Make all your thoughts an offering to Brahman, just like you make your food an offering.
I have something to bring up from your Rudra Hridaya classes in Portland. And in a sense, you have everything you've said today talks to this, but the way it said was very succinct. And we may have some new people here, so I just thought I would repeat it, and you could say more about it if you like. You said, you don't exist as a human being. You only exist as Brahman. You don't exist as a human being. You only exist as Brahman. And so it raises the question, then, with this form, does that discount our lives? Does it discount our experiences? How are we to look at this relative aspect? And it's whether or not it has value or not if we don't exist as a human being. So this is the question that can come up for people, and I was wondering if you would address it.
Certainly, the all existence is only in Brahman. You have those great statements called Mahavakyas, that Brahman Satyam Jagat Mithyam, that Brahman is real, and that the world, Jagat, is Mithya, false. So with the human being who's thinking of themselves as a body-mind mechanism, particularly attached just to body and senses and objects in the world, which is Mithya, false, then it would identify with those things and commit a sort of spiritual suicide. It would think itself to be matter only. And what does that sound like to you when you hear that? It sounds like science to me. It's all about matter. So the whole spiritual element has been taken out of the quotient. The seers are entirely opposite when you study them or you're with them, the luminaries. They're thinking exactly the opposite of that. And so they're truly existing. They last forever. I mean, who could outlive Christ? Well, Buddha did by 500 years. Who could outlive Buddha? Krishna did by 3,000 years. Who could outlive him? Ram did by thousands of years. So these beings last forever because they live in divine existence. So when we say you don't exist as a human being, we mean exactly you don't exist as a body. That passes. You don't exist as senses because those shut down, and you don't exist as matter because that's constantly undergoing birth, growth, decay, old age, decay, and death. Those are the 5 transformations. Your true self doesn't transform. Brahman doesn't transform. Nature transforms, seemingly. It's got its seeds too that are eternal. So it's always identifying with the real and disidentifying more and more with the unreal. Then to realize that your existence is only in Brahman, and nothing else can presuppose that. Nothing can outstrip. It's higher than the highest, lower than the lowest, faster than the fastest, and slower than the slowest. It's everywhere on all sides at once. It's spontaneous and immediate. And that's what existence is, if you want a definition for it. And so, as I just chanted, Yato vacha nivarchante aprapya manasa saha. Why does the mind fall back from it? Can't express it. Goes into samadhi when it tries, and the tongue can't speak about it. Goes silent and mute when it encounters it. See, when all of a sudden it shows up in consciousness, or consciousness itself shows itself up, and mind ego complex fall back in awe. It'd be one way of defining the words of that chant. So then you've seen true existence, and the further you go towards Brahman, the further away you go from the world. The further you go into deep sleep tonight, the further you go away from your body and senses. They shut down. They might as well not even exist. So what is existence then? You don't exist as a human being then means exactly that. You don't exist as a body or as anything non-eternal or as anything changing, anything mutable, anything limited, anything conditioned. Then you start to get into the mind with its conditionings, its karmas, its vasanas. You're none of that either. And so you're doing this neti process, not this, at least the Jnani is. And you're thinking ignorance away. Or if you're a bhakta, you're loving it away. You're saying all this. So you're going for the goal of I am that. Either way, whether you're the Jnani or the bhakta, your mind is being overtaken with this realization, I am that, or that thou art. Tat Tvamasi, Tat Tvamasi, Tat Tvamasi. Say Om Tat Sat, Vivekananda said. For they know not truth, who dream such vacant dreams, as father, mother, children, wife, and friend. The sexless self. Whose father is he? Whose mother? Whose friend? Is he who is but one. The self is all in all, and none else exists, and thou art that. Is how Vivekananda would answer the question. So the more you put your mind on things that are unreal, the more likely it is that you fall into that kind of hypnotism that Maya has brought down upon billions of souls. And soon you're saying, why am I the lucky one? Why is she giving me eyes or an eye to see through it? And you feel very fortunate indeed to know what the truth is in an age like this. Well, that's the sat asat category that you bring in, existence, non-existence. And you can use asat in the sense of non-existence means nothing exists but Brahman. But you can also use asat as a very high principle, is that even the thought of Brahman goes away. All thoughts go away when you're one with that. You've transcended thought, the thinker, and the knowledge that you're thinking about. And that's a very high state. So they've even called that asat. Nothing exists anymore. Just you. They call that, of course, vilapya shantim paramam bhajasva, right? Call that eternal peace and everlasting bliss. And it's unimaginable and incomprehensible, particularly prior to having experienced it. Once you've experienced, then you're like Buddha coming out of nirvana. You can't speak about it for days. There's just no words that can describe it. So that was a good question. And I would say that the more you accent the positive side of that question, the better. We used to say that about that saying in Vedanta. Brahman Satya Jagat Mithya. Brahman is real, the world is false. Amazingly how so many minds would immediately hear the last words and forget the first three. Upon hearing that Brahman is real, they forget that. And then the world is false. They don't like that at all. They want the world to be real so much. And that's why karma is there and suffering. And if you want a direct answer to why is there suffering, because they believe the world is real and that it can fulfill them. Sri Ramakrishna said the world's like a hog plum fruit. You know what a hog plum is? It's got a huge seed in the middle. It's covered with skin, wrinkled skin. And it's got just a tiny little bit of flesh around the seed. And if you eat that, it gives you indigestion. So you can say that Sri Ramakrishna's assessment of the world is a pretty dour one. But you could also say that he was always in samadhi because he would speak to people who are attached to the world like that. But he himself would always be in Brahman, showing them how to live, how to exist with a capital E. Sat, Chit, Ananda, again, Sat is that existence. Like nobody should have any argument or contention about that. I exist. Nobody says I don't exist. Not even the people who haven't realized Brahman are saying I don't exist. Everyone says I am. There's no other way to it. That alone is proof of God's existence if you need it. So that's why we can all start with Sat, on Satsang day like this and speak about it, or listen to others speak about it. Any final questions in our 5 minutes or so we have left, 6 minutes? Yes, go ahead and speak up.
Okay, so my question is, I have definitely like a brooding mind, Klishtavirtis kind of thing, and I try to meditate while I'm walking. And I just had a question about the beach mantras, Om and Hrim, and just chanting Om and how that's supposed to represent Brahman and static, and then Hrim's supposed to represent more Shakti, more dynamic. And does like the syllable Hrim being 2 syllables be part of that, or Om? I don't know, the 2 mantras while I'm walking, I'll on the in breath I'll go Ha, and then on the out breath I'll go Hrim, and that's how I'll do that. that mantra, and then Om I'll just chant while I'm right before I meditate. I just want to know if you could have some input on those two mantras.
Yes, those two bijams of a mantra. You mentioned the word bijam. So, of course, Om is the Sri Ramakrishna called that the word of Brahman. That's the best word to express in Veda, in Tantra, in Gita, in Samkhya. You look at any of the Indian darshanas, which are prominent, and of course, even the Buddhist mantras, those schools that use them, like Tibetan, they start out with Om. Om Mani Padme Hum. You see, Om Tari Tari Turi Swaha. I got my Buddhist mantra when I was younger from Karmapa. So all of them start out with that word. So that's the best word to express out here the profundity and non-duality and depth of Almighty Spirit or Brahman or Allah. Or, I mean, when you said Hrim, I was thinking Sufi. All of a sudden you were talking about Sufism because Hrim is a Sufi name, but actually it's just Hrim. And if you want to divide it into four, then it's Ha, Ra, E, M. That's a teaching in the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam. You can divide Om into three mantras, we would call, syllables, but Ha, Ra, E, M is four. And so she wants you to meditate on Hrim. That's a mother bijam, divine mother bijam. That's the bijam specific to Durga and Kali. And then you have I'm, A-I-M, specific to Saraswati, and Shrim, specific to Lakshmi, and so forth. So each of the goddesses have a specific bijam that you call on them with. It's like a doorbell. It's like, Hrim. It's like, or a phone. I'm calling you, mother. Would you pick up, please? So, in the case of Ha'ra'im, then those have specific representations. Like if you say you're walking, so if you say Ha, H or H-A, then you're already in the manifestation of that while you're walking. It just means trees, plants, water, earth, mountains, sky. All of those are specified. The outer tattvas are specified by that first utterance of Hrim. And then when you get to Ra, it begins to go inward and it takes up things that are in the mental body, the psychic body. And then, you can match these up also with waking, dreaming, and deep sleep states. Ha with waking, Ra with dreaming, E, the I, with deep sleep, and then M is dissolution. Lord Shiva, dissolves everything. M, just like Om, you just bring the lips together. Even the word itself stops the sentence, stops the thought, and stops everything that comes from thought. Relative existence stops there. So all of those, that, in the short time, we have some classes on that. You could write in, and if you want to look on the SIV, we can direct you to certain classes wherein wherein Om and Hrim were both talked about in depth like this. But yeah, it's a very beautiful thing to be in the know of. And I'd say if it's in your mantra and if the guru gave you the mantra, then that's a good way to, as we were saying earlier, purify the mind and do the practice that's necessary. Yes, so then I will see you an hour for God blogs, hopefully. Om Sato Ma Sadgamaya Tamasoma Joy Tir Gamoya. Richorma Amritam Gamaya. Abira Bira Mayeti Rudranate Dakshina Mukam. Tenamam Pahinicham. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from darkness to light, from lower truth to higher truth, from the unreal to the real, and from the illusion of death to eternal life. Reach us through and through, O Lord and Mother, with thy sweet and benign presence. Om, peace, peace, peace. Peace be unto us, peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om, Tat Sat.